Welcome back. We have our list over here, and we want to be able to run my linked list.reverse that will reverse this list for us. Let's figure out the code here. The first thing we want to do is to do a bit of a check. Imagine if we only had one item in the list. If there's one node or item in the list, then, well, we don't need to really reverse it. It's already there. So if this list only contained one, just return whatever we have for now. So let's do that check here. And we can just say if this.head.next, and this exclamation mark means doesn't exist. That means if this head.next, if one is only one and it's null, this exclamation mark is going to turn this into the opposite, which the way JavaScript works will turn this into true. I know it's a little bit confusing, but hopefully you're with me on that one. All we're saying is if this is the only node and there's only a head node here, I could also do this by checking the length, and we have the length property. So I could do something like if this.length is equal to 1, but let's just keep it the way it is for now. If there is only one element, just simply return this.head, the node. Or we can just return this as well. Otherwise, let's get into the fun coding part. The first thing we want to do is say we want to have the first item equals to this.head. And we're just keeping track of it here. So we're going to say that we now have a reference to this.head. And we also have a reference now to the second item in the list. So this is going to be first.next. So now that we have first and second, we can do some looping. We can say while the second node exists, that is, as long as second is not null. So as long as that's happening, we're going to create a temporary variable that holds second.next. So we can actually call this third if we want, but I'm choosing temp because this is going to change. So we have a reference to first, second, and third. So 1, 10, and 16. From here, we can now say second.next is going to equal the first element. First is going to equal the second element. And second is going to equal the temp element. Oh boy, what just happened here? I know that was a lot of code without a lot of explanation. But let's go through it line by line. We're looping here after we've grabbed 1 and we've grabbed 10. And now I'm going to say as long as this second variable has a value and it's not null, if that node exists, then I want you to create a temp variable that holds 16. From there, I'm going to grab that second.next, which is the property inside of 10. And I'm going to say that 10 is now going to point, so second.next is going to point to the first. So 10 has an arrow pointing to 1. And the first variable, which was the head, now becomes 10. And the second item becomes 16. We've switched the pointers. 1 to 10 now goes 10 to 1. And we've switched the variables, first and second, to now have 10 and 16. And we loop through and do the same thing where we have the pointer 10 to 16 reversed so that 16 points to 10. And we change the variable so that it's 16 and 18. So we loop through this, we loop through this, we loop through this. And then the final thing we need to do is to say that this.head, because this.head still has the value of 1 in it, we're going to say that .next is going to equal to null. We're going to have 1 point to null, and this .head now is instead going to be the first. And remember, by the time we loop through everything, first becomes 88 and second becomes null. So we are now changing at the very end 88 to be equal to the head. And we also want to make sure that the tail is now 1. And the way we do that, we have to go before the while loop and see here that this dot head, this first item, should be the tail now. So at the beginning, before we do the loop, the tail become this dot head. All right, I know that was confusing, but let's see if that works. This is one of those problems that you really have to draw it out. And just by looking at this code, it's really hard for you to understand what's going on. I recommend that you code this along and step by step, perhaps console log to understand what's going on. If I reverse this list and click run, I get undefined because we have to return something. So let's return this dot print list. I'm going to run this. All right, let me just make sure that we're reversing. I'm going to comment it out. So we have the original list, 1, 10, 16, 88. If we reverse it, we have 88, 16, 10, and 1. And just for good measure, instead of printing list, let's just return this here. So we get the entire linked list to make sure everything is working properly. I have a linked list that has a head value of 88 and a tail value of 1. Looks like it's working. Awesome. Good job getting this far. And if you're able to understand this, I think this is probably the most difficult concept to understand in this entire course. So if you're able to get this, good job. If not, you might have to watch this video a couple of times. In the end, and this is the beauty of programming, all we're doing is logical steps. And no matter what language you use, whether it's JavaScript, like we did in this case, the steps to create a linked list are the exact same. Syntax may differ, but the logic is the same. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.